Hello and welcome to the Box Score Network NFL Draft Show. My name is Simon Short. Joining me tonight is Peyton Davila of Two Peas on a Pod. Peyton, welcome in, man. How you doing?
I am doing great, Simon. Glad to get into my first big board.
We are here to continue our big board series, continue our NFL draft coverage. If you are here for the first time, welcome. Thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, comment. You are going to be flooded in your notifications with NFL draft content from us, myself, Peyton, Ben. Austin will be in here soon as well, but the whole NFL draft team at Box Score Network is going to be all in your feed from now until April's draft. So let's get right into it. We're here for Peyton's Big Board 1.0. This is subject to change. Peyton will likely at least have one more big board go up between now and the draft. So don't hate on him too much in the comments. But we're going to go through these a couple at a time. We're not going to hit every prospect tonight. We're not going to read through at this point, especially these top. We're going to 32. You guys know who the top guys in the draft are. But we're going to specifically get into Peyton's brain and figure out what he values, why he's got certain guys higher or lower than maybe the consensus. So I'm going to throw the first eight up on the screen now, Peyton, for the viewers. So obviously, Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love, you have one, two. So everyone knows what that conversation is, right? You really like the players, positional value be damned. We're not worried about that. We're just taking players you like a whole lot. And I don't think there's a lot of debate against where people would have these guys, or at least think of these guys as individual players. But what I want to ask you about is Makai Lemon. You have here at eight. Now, this is a guy that has been a long riser, like one of those fireworks that shoots off that as soon as it's above the tree line, you know it's going to do something. You have to wait till it gets to the top because in the summer he was like, I don't know, in the like day two category. As soon as the season starts, he's like, oh, this is a first round guy. And now everyone's just kind of seeing how high they all want to put him. So why do you have Makai Lemon in your top eight?
Okay, so part of this is PTSD, like for lack of a better way of putting it, from 2 years ago. And I guess like the like mission statement with this, like McKylan being at eight on my big board, is I'm not gonna make the same mistake that I made with JSN.
Mm,
And in today's NFL, like in this current like 5 year, evolution that we've gotten into the NFL, and what works at the wide receiver position is top end speed is kind of like, it's sure it's great, but you don't really need it to be successful. You just can't have
hmm
like bottom tier, like terrible speed.
hmm
Um, you don't necessarily have to be big at wide receiver. Like yes, relative to like historical comparisons at the combine, he is in like the lower, um, what's the word percentiles like
hmm
of height and weight. But if you like shrink the sample size down to last 5, even like 10 years, it's not as small as you think, and
hmm
relatively speaking. Um, so that's another thing. And then I just think that the things that he does well are immediately going to transfer to the way that receivers play nowadays. Like he has incredible ball tracking, great control with his feet, field awareness, and like IQ, just being able to find open
hmm
zones, like akin to Cooper Cup, JSN, Amon St. Brown, like all these guys that just like succeed in that way. These are guys that become elite receivers in the NFL. And I'm not, obviously it's the draft. I'm not going to say that he will be an elite NFL receiver, but there's a lot of signs telling me that based on the way that we have seen receivers stick around and become those elite levels of receivers, you can kind of have this prototype become that if they're in the right situation, obviously. Um, I think that because of the way that he wins, I put him at wide receiver two over it, which that's probably like kind of the biggest gripe maybe for some people, is that he's at wide receiver two. Most people have him at wide receiver three and a little
hmm
lower on their boards. And I ultimately, like, as much as I like, because I have Jordan Tyson as my wide receiver three. Ultimately, I like, they're very different players. First off,
hmm
but like I like Tyson, but and I don't want to turn this into a Jordan Tyson conversation. But if I'm looking at them and I a lot of people still have the medical concerns with Tyson, and I
hmm
do think that that's kind of what's keeping me from putting Tyson above Lemon. It's not necessarily a I love Lemon so much more than Tyson.
Yeah.
So there is a world where, let's say post combine we get the medicals on Tyson, it's like, oh, they're not as bad as everybody thinks they are. There's a world where I might have like Tyson up at like 8 or 9, and Makai's kind of at 10, which I'm still
Hmm.
really high on Makai Lemon, but it's not because I'm down on Jordan Tyson. So I I don't really see a lot of ways other than Makai Lemon being stuck in a situation where the team doesn't know how to use him,
Hmm.
in at him just flat out failing as an NFL prospect.
I like the Amon-Ra St. Brown mention. I don't know if I'd liken them one to one, but that just that idea
No,
of
no, no.
a
Yeah.
player being smaller but not winning in the ways that traditionally smaller receivers have won.
Yeah.
There is an archetype for how that can happen, and he's got this great combination of he's the new age of wide receiver that like just feels space out and just kind of knows how to slither their way to
Hmm.
wins, whether it's in a route or in a quarter in a game, but also physicality, like will run through your
Yeah.
face and just like is like kind of mean about it. And so that combination is something that I wouldn't pass on. I love Mekhi Lemon being up here for you. Um, give me one other guy in this top eight that you kind of want to highlight here. Who else? And we're gonna save edge rushers a little bit for the end. So if we skip over edge rushers a couple times where people are wondering what's going on, we'll get to them. But any other person in this top eight you want to hit?
Yeah. I guess Peter Woods, because I guess I just am higher, at least as far as what we can tell based on our conversations with our Box Score Network teammates. I'm probably a little higher on him than most people, and I guess I didn't realize that people a didn't think he was the best defensive tackle in this draft, or b, if they do, they're just not that high on him. I'm not saying that he's going to be this good, but level of prospect wise, he's kind of somewhere either in between or kind of leaning towards more of that. Like if we're putting these three prospects and like power ranking them as to what they were coming out of college, like Jalen Carter's way up here, right? Then we have Peter Woods, and then there's like Byron Murphy might be like just below Peter Woods, and Byron Murphy as a prospect is different than what we know him now. Like we knew Byron Murphy was pretty good. We didn't know he was going to be like probably going to be an All Pro at some point at level defensive tackle. Um, Peter Woods though, I mean, he starts off as a tweener, and then he kind of gets settled into that interior defensive line role. And I just think that based on the way he wins in on the interior, even with Clemson being an absolute like crapshoot of a season that they had based on the expectations, I still of all those players at Clemson, he was the guy that was just I never wavered on. Okay, I still see him doing everything that he did before, but better, even though the team is not succeeding. Um, and I still think there's room for improvement as a pass rusher. I think there's a lot of
Hmm. Hmm.
development that can happen if he gets in the right coaching room that can actually equip him with a pass rush plan. Because right now it's kind of just like bull rush, and I don't really know what else to do after that. And that's fine because you can usually coach that up. But it is really hard to find guys with his athleticism at interior defensive on the interior defensive line. Goodness, um, and the like just because of when you watch him on tape, he decimates pretty much everybody that he goes against because he's just a matchup
Hmm.
nightmare. Um, I do think that at the very worst, like his floor is so high just because he's going to be good against the run.
Yes.
No matter what, he's just going to eat up gaps,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
he's going to stick around. But I think there is a lot more room for improvement, and I'm willing to bet on the upside in his specific case that he's going to be able to develop some kind of pass rush to where he becomes an elite defensive tackle.
I think we're gonna see as long as the combine measurements, and I don't know what he's gonna end up doing. I think we're gonna see a vault of him going back up boards because of how the Super Bowl played out, because of
Right.
the presence of those interior defensive linemen, because and we saw this, the reason why he was the whole preseason number one overall guy on all the boards was because there is starting to be more of an appreciation for defensive tackles and what they do as pocket pushers and what they do as penetrators. And we're starting to have these conversations of is an elite defensive tackle actually better than an elite edge rusher these days? Like, or how far down the tier list can you go before you would want the edge rusher over the defensive tackle? And I totally get that. And Woods, I mean, I remember my in my initial scouting of him was this guy could be a two gapper, This guy could be a penetrator. This guy could be a shooter. This guy could be in a 4-3 on the inside. This guy could be a 3-4 nose. This guy could be a 3-4 defense tackle slash five, five tech. Like, and I bet, and viewers on here might know at this point, I don't watch college football. I'm not the college football season guy, but I am watching the film from all of these guys. And I wonder if a better college football expert, when I know you could, we're not having this conversation right now, would tell me Clemson just had so many issues over the course of the season that they started making his head spin with what they're probably asking him to do week to week, because that's what you see in bad college football teams is we don't have a plan. Hey, Tyler Warren, can you snap the ball, throw the ball to yourself and catch a touchdown? Um, and I could see Peter Woods being like, hey, I need you to two gap, but I also need you to be the one to get after the quarterback. So if you could do both at the same time, that'd be great. Um, I could see that, and that's part of his decline down boards. But with the presence of the Super Bowl and what he might be able to do at the combine, I do also like his first step. I really like the way he can shoot gaps. So I think there could be some high end potential there. Let's keep moving. Let's get to our 9 to 16 here, kind of next eight. I love that it's headlined by Sonny Styles to talk about another guy that's shooting up boards. But I specifically wanted to ask you about the cornerback one question. Jermon McCoy and Mansour Delane. I think this is something that's pretty evenly split on draft Twitter and amongst draft nicks, like who is CB1. Why do you have McCoy above Delane? Obviously, you have them back to back. It's not like you love one and hate the other, but what gives McCoy that edge for you?
So I know that a lot of people probably are surprised to see a cornerback who is coming off an ACL tear be as high as McCoy is on a lot of boards. And if you just weren't watching, because Tennessee in 2024 was a very good team, and if you weren't watching them, you probably I can understand maybe like why you would be surprised to see McCoy over Mansour Delane, who had just was on the field, so therefore had a lot more eyes on him from this past season. But Jamal McCoy had like one of the best seasons as a college football player at the cornerback position I've seen in my lifetime. He was an elite man corner, was awesome in zone. He had great ball skills. He was physically taxing in a way like similar to how Devon Weatherspoon was whenever he came out of like even now like where he's gonna like beat you up the entire game and you're gonna end up like by the time you get to the second half even you're gonna feel like you've played a full game just because he's a lot more physical than a lot of the guys that play the position. Um, I mean I and the other thing is that he's also really going to run support. So there's just not really for me a lot of holes in his game. Like the only thing I can say is maybe like he might draw a few more penalties here and there, but that's kind of like that's just going to happen whenever you play that style. So I McCoy is one of the few guys at cornerback that find it really hard to like poke holes in him as a prospect. So to me, it's like if he weren't if he didn't come off an ACL tear, I feel like he could possibly go like in that 5 to 8 range. And it wouldn't be like nobody would bat an eye. I whereas Delane, I had a lot of hopes for going into his junior year. He was at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech 2 years ago was seen as like this darling team going into the season. I shouldn't say 2 years ago. Well, yeah, 2 years ago, and they had two corners that like I was just over the moon about. And now I'm forgetting the first one, Dorian Strong. Dorian Strong and then Mansour Delane was on the other side, and I was like, dude, these guys are going to be locking everybody up in the ACC. That didn't happen because the rest of the team just wasn't that good. So Dorian Strong ends up getting drafted. Mansour Delane stays, and then he transfers, and he has a great year at LSU, and he has pretty much the same like measurables at like height and weight wise, like size wise as McCoy. So they're not that different of players.
Hmm.
The biggest difference to me, because they do kind of play that physical, aggressive coverage style, like the biggest difference is that Mansour wasn't as like sound of a tackler as McCoy was, and I saw McCoy deal a lot better with speed than Delane did. Those were the biggest difference. I mean, that seems like super. I am being very nitpicky. Like that doesn't mean that Mansour was bad against fast wide receivers. It's just that
Right. Hmm.
whenever you watch the two, like you kind of have to figure out which one does something better than the other, and that was the big difference for me. Is that I couldn't find situations where Jamal McCoy struggled against a certain prototype of wide receiver, whereas Delane, it's like he could just use better technique whenever he's dealing with faster receivers.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The McCoy brand of cornerback prospect is someone that I was certainly in love with. That was always my like go-to archetype. Um, I do, and this is anecdotal. I'd have to really go back and look. But I do have a bad track record of anecdotal thoughts on defensive backs getting into the NFL. Um, but I feel like those are the guys that are the high risk, high reward. And hey, if you're picking in the first round, you need a CB1, like maybe, you swing for the fences, go for it. History does show like if you get the top corner in the NFL draft, that's a huge difference. If you get corner two or corner eight, that's not always a big difference. So if you're gonna swing for a dude, swing for a dude. I get that. But I also think that type, that I just want to be impressed, man. I just want to punch everybody in the head as soon as the ball is snapped, and maybe sometimes before that. Um, those guys also tend to struggle more, whether it is penalties or whether it is getting beat off the line or whether it is uh, name anything. So that is one thing have in the back of my mind, but I certainly like McCoy's physicality. Let's get to our next group here. CJ Allen, linebacker, Georgia, is leading this next group of eight. But I wanted to specifically talk to you about Chris Bell. Now, Chris Bell is a person that I've had a lot of conversations with offline. I know Ben really likes him, but I don't know. I think the injury might have influenced Ben not getting him in his top 32 when we did Ben's 1.0 a few weeks ago. But talk to me about Chris Bell, why you have him in your top 32 here.
So here's the thing. I have this really bad habit of there's always one skill guy, typically a wide receiver or a running back, that I find myself talking. I find myself talking myself into being like, if this weren't, if it were up to me, this guy would be a first round pick. And it's I even if it's not what I think will happen, like I end up convincing myself that like teams are crazy because they're not going to take him in the first round. Last year was Luther Burden. Like Luther Burden was just like my guy. I was higher than like I think all of us.
Think
I
you
want
were.
to say. And granted, I'm not as high on Chris Bell, but this is just like the guy that I'm like way higher on than everybody else for some reason. We could probably hash out the reasons why. To me, like the torn ACL is just like I just don't. I care less and less about it every year. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just I just care so much less about it than I ever have. Is like, okay, torn ACL, no big deal. He's 20, 22 years old, or I forget what Chris Bell is at this point, but um, not a problem. Like he's just it's gonna be fine. The thing is that I really got into him, and this is when a lot of people probably caught on to him. Is whenever I was watching Louisville play 2 years ago, and obviously Tyler Shuck was there, and it's like, man, there's this guy that Tyler Shuck's throwing the ball to is pretty explosive. Like, who is this dude? And he measures at 6'2", 220. He's explosive, has a ton of speed for his size. And this past season there, he had really good production for 11 games. Like he had 72 catches, like I think it was like 960 yards in 11 games, and he was far and away their best offensive player, at least in the passing game. Isaac Brown's pretty good too, but it, it be, being what he was when he was with Shuck, where they kind of just lined him up and said like, you know what, just be like DK Metcalf, just run downfield. You'll use your athleticism to get open. He did kind of become a more versatile player in this past season. Like they started to use him more in the short area, like put him in motion and kind of move him around enough to where it's like, yeah, you're not a great route runner and you still have a limited route tree. But I mean, I've at least seen some growth in like your usage being varied across, all parts of the field, not just you being, a DK Metcalf type where you're just running down the field, which I'm not trying to dog DK Metcalf, but everybody remembers what kind of prospect he was coming out in the draft, and how one dimensional he was. And so for me, it's Chris Bell. The prototype is I think there's a world where he's the next AJ Brown, and I think there's a ceiling where that is what he is, and because AJ Brown, yes, did have a lot of those limitations coming out of college, but very very like early on showed signs that like, okay, we can kind of develop this a little further, and you can become a real like at least somewhat versatile wide receiver who just happens to be one of the best athletes in the league. Um, and to me, the thing is that I guess it's even if Chris Bell is not, us just say he's not fully healthy, after the ACL or whatever. I at least like his floor at being like a useful receiver at the NFL level. And like to me, he kind of reminds me of like if he doesn't end up reaching that ceiling. Like right now, he's basically Cedric Tillman, and I like Cedric Tillman. A lot of people are probably like, well, that's disappointing. But like Cedric Tillman is a good player when he's on the field, and I think it would be a lot better if he weren't on the Browns.
Hmm.
So, I just think there's a higher floor with this guy than maybe a lot of people see, and I think the potential is through the roof to become like a top 10 talent at the wide receiver position at some point.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, that's a fun player that yeah, certainly wish didn't wasn't dealing with the injury, but it's not of course not what it was years ago when we really had to worry about it, especially for a guy of his size, position, athleticism.
And
Let's
I mean
get
one more thing to say about it is like when you get to this point, and I'm not saying that he's going to go here in the draft, but like I have him in he's in at 23. When you get to this point, you can kind of use the potential as like a trump card over baseline, floor for certain prospects, and he's just one of them.
and it's not a mock, but if we were working off of this board and people were doing what they say they do at the draft and they work off of their board,
Right.
if he went to a playoff team that ostensibly had like a wide receiver one or they had like a more pronounced like a point of attack number one kind of person, and Chris Bell is like a complementary piece, like that's a great place to be. Are you drafting this guy? And again, you have him at 23, you don't have him at five. Are you drafting him at five and saying this is a stud number one wide receiver day one? No. But if
Right.
you're getting him, I mean, you know, I can't even say the Chiefs now. Who, if you're getting him on the Bills,
Bills, yeah. That's
because
probably
the
the one
Bills
that
at the end
everybody
of
will
the first
say.
round, wide receivers, that hits all the time. That's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bills fans, just gave you PTSD. Let's move on here to your final eight, and then again, we'll double back and we'll talk about some edge rushers. But here's your final eight, the rest of your 32 of your big board. Another new name that Ben and I haven't had yet, AJ Halsey, the safety. Can you talk to me about that player and why they are on your top 32?
So again, this is like one of the Peyton's brain does certain things that may not make sense to other people. Um, I'm a fan of a Big 12 school that typically is not at the top of the, the conference standings. So when other teams play against us, I usually am like, oh, that's a new player that I didn't know existed before. He looks really good. What's that guy's name? And for 2 years, that was AJ Halsey. AJ Halsey was at Houston for 2 years before the season at LSU. Ends up transferring, and I mean, I kind of noticed it whenever he was at Houston. Like there was a couple games where he played against him, and I mean, he lit up one of our wide receivers, and I was like, wow, that dude hits hard. And then I realized that it's not just because he's bigger than like in the Big 12, like you just don't have as much size, and then you get to LSU, and it's like, oh, he's doing it to guys in the SEC as well. Okay, so he's just that has that much power and that much strength as a hitter at the safety position, very much like an old school style of strong safety, for sure. In the way that he is so aggressive and physical whenever he's attacking ball carriers. So I to me, like I do have kind of a thing for that, but more so relating to how he plays like the safety position as a whole. Like I think he has really good coverage instincts. He has a really good knack for cutting off passes. Like even if he's not intercepting and like doesn't have the greatest hands, he cuts off passing lanes really really well, and it just has a knack for knowing where the QB is going to go, like reading the QB's eyes from the secondary. As far as like run game effectiveness, like I think he does a really good job in shedding blocks whenever he's getting by downfield linemen. So even if the run is developing, like he's a pretty good container of like preventing explosive plays in the run game. And then I guess like the only thing that I do, which I think this is a really good safety class, and I'm sure that most people think that. Which I mean, I have him pretty high. I don't know if he'll end up getting drafted in the first round, but I think there's a world where he does because we've seen this prototype of succeeding. I guess I should get back to like the knock that I have on him. is that like he's kind of just you know how if you're playing Madden or college whatever football game you decide to play. I don't know if you can say that you do this, but I remember I used to get in the really bad habit of every time I go to tackle somebody, I just use the hit stick.
Oh yeah, of course. Uh-huh.
That's pretty much how he plays as a tackler. But the problem is that like when you do that, you also whiff a lot.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
like it's such a simple thing, but
Yeah.
he just that's like the one thing that I wish he didn't do. Because sometimes he like sells out. He's just gonna punch this dude in the mouth, and then it's El Toro with the red cape. And so that's like the one knock against him. But to me, I see a lot of. And I'm not saying this is the player that he is, but like I see a lot of similarities to the way that like Xavier McKinney kind of came to the league, especially
Mm,
and even from like like an athleticism standpoint. Like Halsey's not the fastest dude. Like he's not like the biggest safety, but he has enough size to like play the position. But he's just so strong and so dense and compact that he's able to develop all the other skills while he's in the league and is able to kind of be a physical presence for whatever team he goes to. That's the biggest thing for me is like I think that he has a home in the league based on what I've seen succeed at the strong, specifically at strong safety. Like I don't think he has the I don't think he has the ability to convert to a free safety and like be strictly like playing. I think he'll kind of get killed a little bit in coverage if he does that, but he's good enough in coverage to be a day one starter. I think.
yeah, in terms of the quality of the safety class, I think for much of the season it was viewed as Caleb Downs and really nobody else. And Downs was
Yeah.
so good that all these guys were like pushed down like into day three essentially on boards and mock stuff. But now as we get closer and people are actually like diving in and paying more attention, looking more at the day two guys, several of these safeties are getting into day two. So I'm sure we could see these guys continue to move up. All right, let's address the elephant in the room here. We have not talked about any edge rusher yet. So
Nope.
I'm pulling up just Peyton's edge rusher board here. I'm gonna list the names. Peyton, I don't you're not gonna go through all these guys one at a time. We are gonna talk about the guy at the end though. Um, but I more just want your feel and your value and where you kind of like tier things out, like what you're looking for. So Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, David Bailey are your top three edge rushers. You have them all as top five players. Keldrick Fall, Cassius Howell, TJ Parker are all in that like in the early to mid 20s kind of range as your 4, 5, 6. And then Akeem Mesidor and is it Gabe Yakis? I don't even know this guy's name to be completely honest with you. Is it? It's not
Akis.
Jackass, is it?
It's
Okay.
not.
All
It's
right.
not Jackass. No.
All right. I'm,
No.
I'm
It's a silent J.
okay.
It's
Akis,
Akis.
great.
Just Akis.
Um, they're rounding out your top 32 there at the bottom. But just talk to me about like those guys at the top. What separates them? What makes an edge rusher a top five guy for you? And then those guys in the middle. What makes an edge rusher a guy that you would be like if it's a playoff team, they're in that range as like you can be a complimentary pass rusher on a playoff team, but maybe not to a team that needs an edge one. And then when you're getting here to the end of the first round, the end of your top 32, what's that profile of edge rusher look like to you?
So I'll start at the top. I think like it's kind of I don't want to say it's basic to think this way, but like it's essentially when you have the Venn diagram of like the size and the measurables plus the traits and the technique plus the production equals like NFL day one starter going to probably be one of the best edge rushers in the league at some point. Like that's tier one to me. And I mean like I don't know that I will say I don't know that either of these guys is like generational pass rusher because
Right,
my tier one in this case is very much reserved to the class. Like there is no Miles Garrett, so to speak,
right, right,
of
right.
this draft. As much as I like Ruben Bain and David Bailey, they're still a tier down from that. But that does not mean that they are, by any means like, oh, they're just, that doesn't mean that they'll ever make all pro or anything like that. I think that these guys are very capable of being that level of pass rusher. But
Yeah. But
um,
they check all the boxes that you're looking for. They don't have any
yes,
question marks on their scouting report for you.
yeah,
Okay, so that's the
and
top.
even for a guy like like I know that the conversation with Bane is like he's got the arm outlier thing, and it's just like, but whenever you have a certain specialized skill that automatically omits that, like with his hand
Hmm.
usage and how like
Hmm.
his first step where and power, obviously that the way
Yeah.
he wins, it's not really something that you can. I'm gonna ignore it. unfortunately. Like, granted, we're gonna get into the next tier where like that becomes a problem depending on the other
Hmm.
factors. Like if one of the other check boxes doesn't get checked. But yeah, that's what I would say makes a tier one pass rusher with Bain and Bailey. To move into tier two, it's obviously it's where one of the things is not clicking, and it's like, can I guarantee that that is going to click at the next level? Like and the thing is for Falk and Howell, it's like two very different things. Falk,
Hmm.
it's this dude is literally built like a tank, and he's like just a monster. I don't know that we've seen many edge rushers who are built like this guy. Um, but it's like, yeah, he's going to be a good run defender, but we don't really know if he knows how to run the passer. So we got to figure out the techniques there,
See
and how,
Shamar Stewart and Michael
yeah,
Williams
see
conversations from
Michael,
last year.
like, yeah,
Hmm.
which not to ruin it, but like I see a lot of Michael Williams going on with him, which terrifies
Hmm.
me. But I like it. We've seen it happen to where it's like, but it's gonna work one of these times. Like
This time.
every,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, or yeah, most of the time it works out, but then you get cases like last year where the early returns are not good. But with Cassius Howell, it's kind of like David, or not goodness, I almost I almost combined their names. It's almost like Ruben Bain, except he doesn't really offer a lot other than like, okay, you win with speed and you're
Hmm.
really small, like
Hmm.
size wise,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
have small arms. So are you just like an
What do you
outside
do here?
linebacker?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And like what like who's gonna be like a DPR half the time? It's just really hard to find with him. It's like, yes, you are really good at this one way of winning at pass rush, and you have a like you just are a homing missile for the quarterback. But like, how is that going to translate? Especially because speed often doesn't translate as well as power whenever
Yep.
it comes to pass rush. So like I see it, but which is why I have him ranked below Falk. But obviously they're kind of in that next tier for the same reason, where it's
Yep.
like there's a key thing missing with your profile that I'm not sold on, but I still think you have a lot of potential based on what I see so far. So, and then it's tier three. There's three guys, Parker, Mesidor, and Akis, and it's like kind of a. I don't want to say it's what I just talked about, but to a lesser like to like a lesser degree, but it is in a way. Like
Yeah.
Parker, it's just that, and like we talked about the Clemson thing, and like that
Right.
he seemed more affected than Peter Woods was by like the situation, and how I just didn't think he was nearly as effective as a pass rusher as he
Hmm.
was the previous year. And I don't know if that's situation or if that's, kind of regressing from a pass rush technique
Right.
plan, or like technique standpoint. Mesidor, honestly, I hate to say it, but it's literally just because this dude is old as hell. So like that is literally the only reason. He is awesome. Like I think he is really good, and I honestly would have him in tier two. But I can't convince myself that like you're gonna draft this dude. He's gonna be really good, and then he's literally gonna play like 6 years in the league, and then it's like, all right, body's
Hmm.
breaking down. See you
Yep.
later.
Yeah.
Like
30-year-old second contract kind of person. Mm.
it's a tough sell.
Okay.
Akus is like I'm a lot higher on him than most people. I think that I just see a super duper high floor player where I just think he's going to be. I think he's going to be around a long time because of a athletically. I think he has enough like his size and athletic like his. I don't want to say athletic versatility in the way that like I think he's got everything that you need from an athletic standpoint, but which I don't know if you want to just like transition into talking about him or not, but we can that or like we can
You're
finish
doing it.
this
Yeah.
tiers discussion.
Yep.
I guess all that to say is like there's reason for him. It's like yes, there's concerns from a I would say how do I say this? There's concerns from like block shedding. He doesn't really like shed blocks really well. It's like okay, are you going to be good in the run game or not? Are you going to be able to stay on the field? But as far as rushing the passer, I think there's not a lot of like holes in his game. And I think it's just a matter of like, are you going to be good enough to play all the time? Or are you just going to be kind of like a limited snaps type of player, no matter where you play? Which that's kind of like, I guess, in this tier, it's like you have a super like a really good impact player, but the upside is limited. I guess I would say is kind of
Yeah.
why I lie with this tier, the tier three, and then you get in like the guys you didn't name. Like after that, it's like you know either these super athletes that have no idea like what they're doing whenever they're rushing the passer, but like you're just going to bet on them. Guys who have high production don't have nearly the kind of like athletic profile that we see, or maybe it's just that they kind of are a finished product already, and they don't really warrant you taking them that high in the draft.
So if I were to sum up these eight guys here in these tiers, top three are you check all the boxes, could have high floor, could have high upside.
Yeah,
The next two, Falkenhauer, are you check most of the boxes, could have high upside, but you could have a low floor because of the boxes you don't check off. And then the next three are kind of we have more than one question, and maybe that limits your upside, even if you could be a high floor player.
yeah, I
And
would say
then
that.
and then what I just kind of showed the viewers as well was I went back up to the 17 to 32. So you could kind of see, okay, where's that line for Peyton of where he values other things before you get to that tier break. So like between
Right,
you're at 21 to 25, between Howell and Parker, McDonald, Chris Bell, Ione. I mean, shoot, there's a world where those three guys could come out of this thing as the best player at their position in the draft.
right,
Like that's the kind of ceiling I would say each of those guys have comparative to their positions. And then you get into these other guys down here in the bottom eight, and then if we were to kind of go back up to the 1 through 8, and this is where we'll finish, or the 1 through 16, this is where we'll finish off. This is where you see those guys at the very top, those game changers in your top five that you're talking about. And then you get into, you talked about Peter Woods, you talked about Lemon and Tate, and those are the guys that come before we get to that group of Falk where there's questions. These are the guys that maybe have a few less questions, can be a little bit more impactful.
yeah.
Um,
I know I didn't talk
all right.
about Arvel Reese really at all. I didn't mean to
You
like
see him more
skip
as a
over him.
linebacker?
It's like one of those things where he's in that Jalen Walker vein of last year where I
Yeah.
like kind of primarily rank him as a linebacker, but I could or like Mike Parsons where you rank him as a
Yep.
linebacker, but ultimately ends up being an edge. And I mean
Yeah.
he's number three on my big board. Like what I'm not gonna like talk about him that much
There's not many
because
conversations we need to have it in mid-February about our Reese
yeah,
at this point. Dude's a stud, and I just can't wait to
yeah,
see what he does. All right, that is going to do it. So that was Peyton's big board. It's been a while since Peyton has been on Box Score Network YouTube channel. So Peyton, thanks for being here. Thank you all for watching. Again, if this is your first time here, like, subscribe, comment. If this is the first of our big board videos you have seen, there are two more that are already up. We're gonna have a couple more in about 3 weeks. So we're gonna do a few big board episodes. We'll do a few mocks. But we have player profiles and general draft discussions coming up here on the channel all the time. We're gonna be up to minimum 3 shows a week, starting next week from now until the NFL draft. And we'll be with you through the draft as well. So make sure you guys are here getting reactions, previews, recaps, all that good stuff. Until then, thank you all so much. We will talk to you soon. Have a good one.